This is Daybreak on Trust Television, reaching you live from our studios here in the nation's capital. Now, to kickstart our first discussion on the program, the Global Food Security Challenge is for the world to be able to feed 9 billion people by 2050. By then, it is estimated that the demand for food will be 60% greater than it is today. Owing to this, the United Nations has set zero hunger as the second of its 17 Sustainable Development Goals for the year 2030. Indeed, everybody needs food, but the complexity of delivering sufficient food to a national population and the delivering of sufficient food to a national and the world's population shows why food security is such a priority for all countries, whether developing or developed. For Nigeria, a country of over 200 million people and projected to be about 450 million in a few decades, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown that dangers lie ahead if the country does not begin to depend largely on what it produces globally. Various intervention programs have been introduced by the present administration to address the issue of food security. But how effective are these interventions? We have public policy analyst Peter Idoga here in the studios to provide some answers. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's quite an interesting discussion that we are seeing, on one hand, government interventions through the central bank, for instance. And then again, we are also seeing an increase in the price of food. Rice, for instance, has been a major concern for a lot of people. If you take a look at the price of a 50 kg of rice, it's said to have increased by over 90%. So that's a contradiction, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Excuse me. You see, there are many factors that account for the inflation we are suffering at the moment, which food inflation is leading in the inflation. One of the factors is that we are not even producing sufficiently enough. Then the cost of production per hectare in Nigeria is one of the highest in Africa and in the world. Before the coming of this administration, for instance, 1 hectare of rice, if planted in Nigeria, can only give you maximum of 2.5 to 3 tons per hectare. That is with the best agronomical practices we're having then. But with the advent of anchor borrowers and what the CBN started from KB, we're able to come up with improved seeds. And now we are having between 5, 6, and 7 tons per hectare. But why is the price still high? That is the question. And the problem with the price is that if you consider countries like Netherlands and other countries where we bring in rice from, their cost of production is very, very low, number one. Their yield per hectare is far higher than what we have here, number two. And number three, their government subsidize most of the things we buy here. So if this government opens the border today and allow inflow of rice, the price will drop. But what will be the advantage of doing that? Nothing, because the investment in the rice mill and other value chain will be lost because the individual will not be able to repay their loan. Then the people that are engaged within this circle will also lose their job because we can't compete with these countries. That is one of the reasons. Okay. But what will the government do to bring down the price of food? I would say yes, the intervention has, to a large extent, achieved something. But considering the amount of money that was involved, 864 billion, that is what they told us has been invested in the Anchor Borrowers program. Are we saying the production is commensurate with what has been involved? I wouldn't agree with that. In as much as we agree that yes, some ground has been covered, but CBN performing the role that is essentially outside their circle is supposed to be an intervention, but they are now running the show. I think that's where we have the problem.
Okay, now, we understand that back as at February, the central bank said that over 900 billion naira have actually been disbursed to over 4,000 small-scale farmers. So expectedly that there should be some kind of implication in terms of, you talked about those other foreign countries where their government actually subsidize some of the things. Yeah. And so this money, isn't it also now supposed to go in the form of subsidy for the farmers and then translate into cheaper costs of food items for Nigerians generally? If you look at the farm implements, that central banks sometimes even go ahead to even make available to farmers, fertilizer, for instance.
The question is, where are the farm implements? Today, largely Nigeria still farm with cutlasses and hoe. Where are the tractors? After spending so much money, we had 900 billion, but during the rice pyramid speech, specifically they say 864 billion. How many tractors were purchased? How many people were given the fund? And what did they produce? What we have today is still what is produced essentially by the smallholder farmers. The big farmers that were given fund under anchor borrowers, how many of them have produced food? And where is what they have produced? These are the challenges we have. And again, when you sever an institution like the Bank of Agriculture, that bank is practically dead as we speak now, under an administration that is supposed to have agriculture as one of its pillars. CBN is doing everything. If you look at the impact anchor borrowers had in KB, is because the Bank of Agriculture drove that particular anchor borrowers. But since other banks were involved in driving it, where is the success story?
You know, the agricultural sector is one of the biggest sector we have, for us here in Nigeria. And apart from locally, the federal government's intervention in this sector, we also have, international interventions, just like the International Fund for Agricultural Development has also committed over $1,000, to Nigeria's agricultural sector. But we are not seeing much results, have we?
It's still the same thing, going in a circle. One of our major problems in the country is, we all know, is corruption. Most of these funds did not get where they should go. They are not channeled through the proper place where we'll get result and value for what we are doing. We concentrated on rice, so much on rice. But now, let me give you an instance. 3-4 years ago, a bag of feed, layers match, was about maybe 1,900, 1,950. Today we're talking about 5,000 for the same bag. Why? Because we don't have maize, we don't have soya, we don't have cake from either granite or soya to make the feed. The feed has gone so high. And what we need to do now is to concentrate on producing those things. And how do we produce them? By engaging a bank that is specialized to do that. Bank of Agriculture has been a victim. A victim in the sense that management has been a problem. When you put a round peg in a square hole, you won't get result for it because it won't last.
Okay, now do you consider the attitude of some Nigerians as a problem? For instance, we've had stories about how farmers, who have benefited from this, do not, they consider maybe sometimes the loans, they consider them as some kind of freebies and they do not, pay back. Sometimes you hear all manner of excuses. Oh, insecurity has been a problem. We've not been able to, farm, or maybe the rain season was not sufficient enough, and all of those kind of excuses. Do you consider that as, part of the problem?
It's part of corruption. And I will explain. See what happened in KB. Loans were disbursed. rice was produced. There was no question about that. The rice did well. But you know, when this thing started in 2016, Gaddafi already had issues. The Al-Shabaab has taken over the Mali area and all the Sahel region. And the only place that food was really produced was Kebbi State. And you know, from Kebbi to Benin to Niger, they have common border. And people that were in Kebbi there, you saw trucks of paddy rice, paddy, moving out of the country. The agreement they had with the state government was a buyback agreement. I think at 5,000 or 5,500 per bag. But when this rice was produced, because of this problem of lack of food within the region, a bag of paddy went as much as 9,000, 9,500, 10,000. Ordinarily, a farmer will prefer to pay, to give to the person that will give him cash now, twice what the government will give him at a later date. And that's what they did.
So it's now being, are you now saying that
when
it's
they now
being
sold it,
smuggled out of the country?
Of course.
So we are not just dealing with smuggling in now, we are dealing with smuggling
yes,
out
our
of the
paddy
product.
was taken out. And up to today, it's still going out.
So at the end of the day, who is at lost?
Nigeria. Because the money is from federal government. And as we're talking about the subsidy, yes, there's little subsidy because the fund were disbursed at 9%, not at the market rate. So when it goes out, it's at loss to the country. But because they got this money, and because of corruption, and because of our feeling that whatever I get from the government is my own, they were not willing to pay.
But that money comes back to the Nigerian system, isn't it? So if
To the
you talk
individual.
about the forex, for instance,
To the
isn't that a
No, no, no,
loss?
no. The problem with informal export is that you don't, even if the forex come, it doesn't account for it because it doesn't go to the central bank. It's individual trading. If you are somewhere in Kebbi, between Bagudo and Malabin or so in Benin, people walk across and it's not a difficult thing.
So now, how would you say, insecurity affects our food production? Because there's a statistics that states that over 4 million Nigerians, particularly northern Nigeria, are at risk, of hunger.
Yeah, you see, we are at risk, not just northern Nigeria. It's because of the poverty rate in the northern part of the country. The southern part is richer than the northern part. We are all at risk of food shortage. Insecurity contributed, yes, especially in Borno Axis, where people are largely in the IDP camps and all that. Then in Niger, some places. But what I kept on arguing is that the areas where we don't have security challenges, Nigeria could still produce sufficient food from those areas for the country. What we lack is planning. We lack planning. And why do we lack planning? Because everybody wants to cut corner for self-benefit. That's our major problem. It's not because we don't know what to do. When you talk about the agricultural policies, I think the one coming up now is called NATIP. We have ATA. We had Tuba, Root and Tuba during Obasanjo and all that. But all these things are not adding up to our food production and food sufficiency. It's either we tie one end and leave the other end loose. What do I mean by that? Previously, people who produce maize, they cannot sell, or they'll sell below the price. One good thing this government has done is to make sure that farmers get value for their product. But to produce now, to meet the demand, we are finding it difficult. And I think CBN should allow institutions that were established for the purpose of agriculture to handle it. NISAL, Bank of Agriculture, and the state government also should be encouraged to go into agriculture, because what we see largely It's federal government driving the whole process, and that will be sufficient.
All right, now we'll talk about the involvement of subnationals, and how they can also bridge some of these gaps. But on the part of the farmers, do you think that there's a problem of, education, agricultural extension services? Is it lacking, in the sense that, yes, the central bank, for instance, have supplied seedlings, but yes, it's not yielding as much, sometimes. Maybe because the farmers are not really informed as to how best they can maximize, the seedlings produced.
No, these farmers are more intelligent than most people think. I work with a lot of rural farmers. In fact, most of the rural farmers are, like in rice production in Niger State, they are getting up to 8-9 tons per hectare. They are doing very well. The problem we have is the elite that will take money for agriculture and will not invest it in agriculture. That's our major problem. Then the second thing is some of these small farmers are not ready to repay back their facility because they felt that they have been so cheated. And this is the first time they are getting something from the government, so they should keep it to themselves. It's another problem. The issue of extension workers, yes, we don't have much extension workers. But with the knowledge they have and the ADPs in the state, if agriculture is properly planned, I don't think extension workers should be the problem. Our major problem is tractorization. How do you cultivate expanse of land? Then how do you collect the money back? These are the major challenges in agriculture. But largely, the big farmers are not doing what they are supposed to do. We are still relying largely on smallholder farmers.
Okay. Now, in your assessment, when the COVID-19 pandemic came, there were a lot of disruptions, and at that point, countries were, advised to depend largely on what they produce locally. Would you say the COVID-19 pandemic has affected, Nigeria's ability, to provide sufficient food in some way?
Yeah, it has. And, during the COVID-19, government allowed farmers to go to their farm. But like the normal thing that happens in Abuja, in Nigeria, I was going to visit a farm at Kwali. I was stopped and they said, no, you must get a pass to go. Even with all the evidence that we are going to the farm. Instructions will be given. The security agency might not even understand the implication of that instruction. So sometimes everybody will stay at home. I have a client in Gwagwalada that lost so much in egg production. She had egg produced, no place to sell them. And she lost the whole thing. The birds are living, so you must feed them. You are feeding them, you can't sell the eggs. It's a loss. And most of these people are on loan. They have lost revenue. Nobody is coming to their aid. Paying back the facility becomes a problem. So there are a lot of value chain issues we have in the problems of agriculture. But what we should do as a nation is proper planning. And that proper planning should be that institutions should be given mandate to deliver on what they are established to do. And I think that will go a long way.
Okay, now, over the years, we've seen increase in the exchange rate. Now we are talking more than, officially it's around 410 naira. And then, of course, in the black market, it's much more higher.
Yeah.
Does that have an implication on, our production?
Of course, because most of the tools we use for agriculture now are imported. We are not really fabricating any agricultural equipment in this country. So when you are bringing them in, you need to get dollars to bring them in. And that will increase the cost. We are talking about feed mills, rice mill, processing plant. We import all those things. And when you import them at high cost, it's already part of your cost, fixed cost. So it will affect whatever you produce. And you cannot produce competitively if border is open for you to compete with other countries. And that will affect you. I think CBN needs to do much more to stabilize the currency. It's not in our interest.
All right. Now, of course, we have other pending issues that have lingered for quite a while. The issue of power, energy, the issue of roads, the infrastructure issues. I believe those are also factors that affected the cost of production. But to what extent, are they a problem for us, and how best can we deal with that?
Yeah, you see, feeder routes are supposed to be done by states and maybe some agencies. Some farms are not motorable, especially in the middle belt and down south. It's even better in the north because they have low volume of rain. But down this way, some people will produce, bringing those goods produce out of the farm is always a problem. And that is why agriculture should be holistic. If there is a national program, the state should key into the program. It's only when that is done that we'll get better results. But the best result will come from careful planning. And people should be compelled to do what they are supposed to do. If you are supposed to produce, you must produce.
Why is it even such a big issue for some states to actually take advantage of these lands in their disposal, especially in the northern part of the country? We've seen example by Lagos and Kebbi State, but other states are largely behind. What's the issue here?
I think it's just the attitude of the governors and their focus. Most of the youths that are unemployed today, the easiest way to employ them is agriculture. But will you employ a graduate to go and use cutlass and hoe? Will it be possible?
Exactly.
You won't be able to do it. But when you bring them together and you get a tractor, you get a planter, you get boom sprayer, or you use drone to spray, you have a combined harvester to take their things from the field.
So
all they need to do is to wear their t-shirt and jeans.
So we've not really harnessed mechanized farming yet.
That is what we need. Until we get to that point, we won't be food secured. There's no way.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the program this morning. We hope to have you next time.
Thank you for having me.